welcome everybody. It's really nice to see so many people here. It's fantastic. Thank you for joining us and taking the time out of your day. Today we're going to just run through some of the findings from the project. There's just so much, those of you who are involved in community woodland groups will know that they undertake so many different things. And there's such a wealth of information and outcomes and benefits from communities running and managing their own woodlands that it's really hard to kind of cover all of that. So we've picked a few bits and pieces, and we'll try and cover some of the highlights, and just encourage you to continue to inquire or to liaise with the groups and find out more in due course. And we'll give some other opportunities for doing that, different things. And there's such a wealth of information and outcomes and benefits from communities running and managing their own woodlands that it's really hard to kind of cover all of that. So we've picked a few bits and pieces, and we'll try and cover some of the highlights, and just encourage you to continue to inquire or to liaise with the groups and find out more in due course. And we'll give some other opportunities for doing that, as Joe said, towards the end. We're going to view one of the films that was made as part of the project. Then I'm going to give a short presentation, and Diane will be leading some questions and answers. So we do have people here from the 4 community woodland groups who were involved in the project. They are Friends of Glenan Wood, Cormonachan Community Woodlands, Arkaig Community Forest, and Knoydart Forest Trust. So feel free to post questions throughout for their short Q&A panel when we come to that section, and then there'll just be a few more slides to round up, and we aim to not run over too much today. So we might have to come back to some of those questions at a later date if everyone has lots to chat about. So really, we're just going to move on. The project has produced a series of films and a series of case studies, and we're going to watch the main film today. It's about 15 minutes long. We're going to do a process for that where you watch it through your own computer rather than me streaming it live to you. It's more kind on all of our rural broadband networks to do that. And I'm going to ask that when Joe's going to post the link in the chat, and when you press the link to watch the film, if you can turn off your screen and stay on mute, so you stop sharing your video. And then when you come to the end of the film, if you can hit stop, sometimes YouTube kindly goes into autoplay and continues to then watch the rest of the films, which is lovely, but can you do that after? And then we can all come back and move on with the rest of today. So when you've pressed stop, if you can turn your camera back on, and then we know that you have watched the film and finished it. So the film is a bit of an amalgamation of the 4 groups. Each of the groups does have their own video, which goes into things in much more depth. So without further ado, I'm going to invite you to turn off your cameras and click the YouTube link that Joe is posting in the chat, and I'll see you in about 15 minutes or so. Enjoy. I think that's most people coming back from completing the videos now. That's great. Wonderful. So I hope you enjoyed the film as a kind of summary and an introduction to the project. And as we said earlier, if you do have any questions arising from that, please feel free to post them in the chat and we'll pick them up in the Q&A. Now, I'm going to run through some slides now. So I'm going to share my screen with you and just chat through some of the kind of highlights and different aspects of the project itself. So this project, as we've said, was carried out over about 6 to 7 months. And to undertake our research, we did a number of different things. We spoke to all of the groups, and we did a bit of desktop research, compiling and assessing some of their paperwork, their planning, their woodland management plans, their business plans, minutes of meetings, accounts, newsletters, social media. The groups are really busy, and it's really interesting to try and capture that information. We also met with the groups, did some initial site meetings, And we then developed a questionnaire to interview the 4 groups and their key partners. And we'll come back to that aspect of partners as we go through the presentation. We also sent round some online surveys around group members, some of the local businesses, and we met with relevant partners and other organisations to try and take a broader look at the wider picture of the work undertaken by these groups. So there's 4 groups involved in this, which is a tiny amount of the groups across Scotland. And yet the amount of work that they undertake is significant. And each has a slightly different focus. So although they all manage native woodlands, they're all working from different aspects because they're aiming to meet the needs of their local communities. So the outputs that we capture today are really only a snapshot from 6 months. Things change, fluid all the time, and things have changed and moved on since, since we wrote this and made the presentation. Grants start and finish, trees are planted and felled, and staff leave and start, and groups constantly evolve with that flexible approach to meet the needs of their local areas. So the project was looking around at native woodlands, and I just thought I'd put some statistics here just to have a little look at what the bigger picture is in terms of native woodlands in the UK. So the numbers on the 2 left-hand donuts are lifted from the National Forestry facts and figures, just to look at that broader picture in terms of the UK as a whole, in terms of Scotland, and then in terms of those 4 groups. And we can see that even in terms of those 4 groups, it's not necessarily all native woodland. There is frequently a mix, even though they're primarily working and managing their native woodlands in the areas. What's interesting is all 4 woodlands contain areas classed as PAWS, planted ancient woodland sites. And within these PAWS, there are remnants of ancient woodlands and ancient semi-natural native woodlands. As mentioned in the film, the communities are quite low in terms of population density. So across the 4 communities, the Knoydart Peninsula, the area around Arkaig Community Forest, the 2 areas in Campbell around Glenan and around Cormonachan Woodlands, there are just over 1,200 resident population, and that fluctuates throughout the year as the number of second homes within those areas is massively above the Scottish average, which is 1.5%. And in these areas, it can be anything from 24 to 32% of second homes. So nearly a third of the houses are not lived in on a regular basis. And that can create issues for people trying to find homes to move into these areas. Also, their younger population is considerably lower than the Scottish average as well. Moving to look at some of the economic benefits that these groups have achieved over recent years. And I'm going to look at them in terms of direct and indirect. And in terms of direct, we're talking about the activities that are undertaken at the group's own hand. Obviously, they work in partnership a lot, but they, at their own hand, they are creating jobs and generating income. In terms of indirect, we're looking at other businesses and organisations that perhaps benefit from the work that the woodlands and the woodland groups do just by having the woodland there. So in terms of direct, we're looking at the amount of investment these groups can bring into their areas. Do they have product sales such as firewood, milled timber, handcrafted project, the trees themselves? Can they sell services? They often undertake contracts for others. They deliver training. They host events, they run workshops. Where they can, they create jobs to undertake their woodland management, perhaps through tree nurseries, tree planting, felling, fencing, deer and invasive species control, and it can create new business such as Wood Knoydart. And in benefits to other businesses then, looking at that, there's a lot around destination marketing. We know that tourism businesses benefit. Many of the accommodation providers around the woodlands highlight the fact that the woodlands are there for their guests to go walking in and to use. We can see that shops and nearby cafes and restaurants benefit from those visitors. And eco and adventure businesses and tourism is on the increase in Scotland through walking, cycling, bike packing trails, and health and well-being retreats, running retreats, fitness retreats. Often new businesses are created locally through having local contractors that then can do work off and on for the groups or for the woodlands, again around woodland management, or undertaking specialist surveys, perhaps around their archaeology or certain species. And the businesses often use the woodland as venues for photography, for well-being, to run theatre, or to film for TV, or to run woodland ecology tours. I mentioned investment, and this is just a snapshot view across a 3-year period. And it talks about the income generated. So it's like the hard cash and also the in-kind contribution here. So if we add the total, we're looking at a £1.3 million over 3 years. And that the actual hard cash is through grants, through earned income, and through donations. And we should not underestimate the amount of time that volunteers contribute to these projects. For example, Cormonachan Community Woodlands have recently undertaken a large national heritage lottery project, which was around £250,000 project, and their volunteers donated almost 1,000 volunteer hours. So let's say that's £20 an hour, £20,000, an equivalent to a part-time job for a year at more than half a job. So it's quite considerable the amount of time that people are giving to raise some of this hard cash as well. And every penny counts. Just a funny aside on that is talking of Cormonachan again, and they rely entirely on grants, donations and memberships, but they have a donations box in their squirrel hide, and it generates enough donations to cover peanuts for the squirrels every year, which is about 400 to 500 quid a year. So it's not, it is possible to self-fund and to do things on a smaller basis as well as the larger. One of the interesting things is to look at Knoydart Forest Trust, who have been around longer than some of the other groups perhaps, but each of the figures here is just for that year. So these figures are per annum, they're not aggregated. And it's just to kind of highlight their ability to earn their own income has increased across time. Because I think a lot of the time we think that perhaps groups rely solely on grants, but this is looking at, well, what else and how else can they generate money? Grants and donations are incredibly important. There's not many businesses that don't receive some form of subsidy at some time across their lifespan. And I think this is a fantastic demonstration of across a 20-year period that their ability to generate that and to earn their own income. So they set up Wood Knoydart in 2013 to develop their activities, focusing more on that ability to generate income, to reinvest in their woodlands and to support local livelihoods. And oh, I've missed one. There we go. Coming back to the indirect aspects of benefits, I just wanted to highlight an interesting story again at Cormonachan, this time with Ardroy Outdoor Education Centre, who are one of their key partners. But Ardroy Outdoor Education Centre was one of the instigators in the community taking on the management of Cormonachan Community Woodlands. In 1998, the Outdoor Ed Centre, along with the primary school and the local community, came together because they felt that their young people had no access to their local landscape. And so they decided to do something about that. And they negotiated with the National Forest Estate body at that time to open access and regain entry into what was a substantially overgrown part of the Scottish rainforest. And they have continued to develop that access and moved on to the group now becoming its own social enterprise in its own right. So sorry, the Community Woodlands group is now their own separate organisation, and Ardroy faced closure from, it was originally run by Fife Council and faced closure, and they came together to do a buyout, not a geographical buyout, but a community of interest buyout. So they are also now a social enterprise. And I think it's one of the things that we came across time and time again, is that as organisations and people took more ownership or involvement in their community woodlands, they became empowered and their confidence grows in terms of their ability to go on and do other things. And so I would think this is, you know, part of Ardroy's learning has been through that process of taking on the woodlands and moving on into becoming their own. And they take around 1,000 children a year up into those woodlands. They're also going to be providing a host position, if you like. So part of the heritage project that Cormonachan Woodland Group has been undertaking will bring a part-time staff, but the Outdoor Education Centre will employ that member of staff so that they are sharing the strengths and so they're using their own strengths and sharing the work across the organisations appropriately. The new paths that have gone into Cormonachan as well will enable the Outdoor Centre to use the woodlands 365 days a year rather than just perhaps from spring to autumn. Looking at current employment levels, and this does fluctuate since we wrote this slide, but this just gives you a kind of spreadsheet or a little look at the job types. And in this slide, direct means employed at the group's own hand, and indirect means employed by their partners. So for example, Knoydart Foundation, Woodland Trust Scotland, Ardroy we've just mentioned. So for example, as you heard in the film, you know, Woodland Trust Scotland employ local people, and wherever possible, they use local contractors for forestry work. So they are also injecting significant resources into this local area. Moving on for a quick look at some of the social benefits from the groups. So by running a lot of volunteering opportunities, by running community gatherings, by hosting days in the woods, excuse me, by running training events, arts, sculpture trails, they're bringing people into the woods. They're building that nature connection. They're creating opportunities to improve their physical and mental health. The young people that come for outdoor woodland learning days or through the outdoor education or attending events are building their confidence, their ability to work as a team. The sculpture trails give people an incentive to go and walk in the woodlands. It draws them in, it entices them off the path, and they can move on through building their ability to inquire and to want to know more or walk a bit further or come back again. So there's always something new to see. And it's hard to kind of capture some of the social benefits. We know that they do increase numbers to the woodlands when they run events. And we know that many organisations are now coming and using the woodlands for learning and education. For example, University of Highlands and Islands, local schools, colleges, outdoor woodland learning groups are bringing their clients and students to the woodlands to gain certificates, to perhaps explore working in forestry in the longer term, to look at teamwork and to gain hard qualifications. So I mentioned partnerships earlier, and the importance of partners, I think, has been mentioned again throughout. And just to highlight the ability of the groups to network. They network on a micro and a macro scale. So they are building relationships constantly with their neighbours, with communities of interest across Scotland, and perhaps community of interest across the world. And the photo here at Cormonachan was from COP26 visit, when people and representatives from the tropical rainforest met those from the Scottish rainforest. And those links continue to build. And so we asked a lot of people what they gain from being in the woodlands. So these are just some of the quotes, and I'll let you just take a minute to perhaps read through some of those. And now I'm going to hand you across to Diane, who's going to coordinate the Q&A session with the folk from the groups today. So thanks, Diane. I'm going to hand across to you.
Thank you, Di. You can stop sharing your screen and we can see everybody. Hello again. I'm just going to start by asking the people that have come to represent the 4 groups to just say hello. So when I call your name, could you unmute yourself and just say hello again? I know that some of you already done this, but if we do this just at the start of this question answer session. So from Arkaig Community Forest, we have Angela Mercer. Angela.
Hi there.
Hi, Angela. Nice to see you. And we also have Catty Kark.
Oh, okay.
Hi, Catty. And for Cormonachan Community Woods, we have Jackie.
Hi.
Hi, Jackie. From Glenan Woods, Robin, are you still here? Unmute yourself.
I'm sorry, I'm going to have to go in about 10 minutes. I've got another meeting. I'm sorry. But
we might manage to stay for the question and answers. That's okay. And we also have Catherine.
Hi there. Hi.
Hi, Catherine. And from Knoydart Forest Trust, we have Lorna.
Hi.
Hi, Lorna. Welcome, everybody. We did have a few questions that came in while we were on the chat. So, and there's a few more coming in. So if there's a direct question to Friends of Glenan Woods, and it's to ask about your pathworks and irrigation of the woodland. Robin or Catherine, would you like to come in and answer?
Well, we've got a lot to do pathwise. We have a lot of work to do on our paths, actually. That's one of our main priorities. So we're hoping to get in probably local contractors to do the work at some point, where there's various grants that we're looking into for that. And irrigation, do you mean for the orchard, for the new orchard we've created?
That was Sue that asked this question. Sue, do you want to come in and clarify?
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you very much. It's probably better me asking the question anyway. Is it Catherine I'm speaking to? And
Robin is here.
And Robin. Morning, Catherine and Robin. Yes, the irrigation. Like, I'm a visitor to the woodland, and I have been over for the last maybe 8 years, something like that. The last few years, I've noticed that there are trenches that have been dug from what is, essentially a high water table that's needed in that woodland. Those trenches are kind of irrigating your woodland. They're not, initially I thought it might have been something to do with trying to take water away from the path, but it isn't working. It's really damaging. And the reason I mention this today is I was actually at a moss and lichen walk on the other side of the water last week. And just the real simple standard floating pathways allowed the biodiversity and the soil biodiversity and the soil health to be untouched, and it was very beautiful. So it's a real concern. I think it's something that you need to maybe go and have a look at. If you haven't had a look at it, you'll be able to see it. What's happening is that people aren't able to walk through that irrigated place because it's just not working, it's boggy. So people are now walking wider and wider and wider, and that bog is spreading out. Now, Gordie Gray-Stevens did mention, you know, elderly trees, and he's absolutely right. But those elderly trees need their symbiotic relationship with the soil beneath them in order to stand at least for a few more 100 years or tens of years. So it's a real concern, Catherine and Robin, and it's almost as like today I'm looking for a commitment to put some floating stuff on there, because it's having real issues.
Can I just say, Sue, I think that's, I mean, if Robin or Catherine would like to come back in, but I do think that's probably something that might be directly a discussion another time. If you got any comment you'd like to make to that.
I'd just like to say that we've had very limited ability to try and improve the path, and the drainage that we've done is, I agree it hasn't worked, but I mean, it was just to try and allow access along the path. But what you say is absolutely true, Sue, and we do need to make some bog bridges, just simple things to allow the sphagnum moss and other stuff to continue and not to be drained, actually.
Okay, thanks very much. Thanks, Robin. Kerry had asked about Gaelic and the contribution of Gaelic, and Joe had mentioned that there's been quite a lot of strong links with the diversity and biodiversity, and that some of the other community woodland groups are linking Gaelic in. Has any of the groups currently looking at including Gaelic in their work? No?
We are actually, we're looking, Glenan as well, we've got somebody who's very keen on Gaelic in the community, and she's trying to create some opportunities to look at words in the woods and poetry. So we're hoping to have an event. We've had an event in the village hall, a Gaelic event, like a kind of ceilidh, which was really popular. And we've got also a young guy who's learning Gaelic. He's not in the community, he's a little bit further afield, but he comes regularly on his bike. So we're hoping that will something will come of that, particularly this year, as we've managed to get some more funding to do community orientated events in the woods.
Lorna, you have?
We don't have any Gaelic speakers in our community at the moment, but we've just got funding to do community Gaelic lessons. So hopefully that might change over time.
Okay. Anybody else?
At Arkaig, the art trail that was put in with the Woodland Trust, there was a lot of consideration taken of Gaelic within that, and Gaelic poetry and stories. And when we were initially acquiring the woodland, we were very careful to get the proper, find out the Gaelic names of each of the different parts of the woodland at the time. But it's something that I think we'll probably move on to and start looking more in depth. But you know, you do one thing at a time, really.
Great, thanks. Now we have a question about woodland crofts from David. He has asked, does anyone have any thoughts on developing woodland crofts? Now I'm going to introduce Arkaig Community Forest and Knoydart Forest. Just I think both of you have been looking at that. So any of the other groups want to mention what they're doing with woodland crofts? I will start with Angela. Angela, could you talk about what's happening with Arkaig?
Very, very early stages. I think we've talked about it a lot, but there isn't really anywhere in the woodlands that we've got at the moment where we would be considering woodland crofts. But I think in the future, we're definitely, certainly our chair is definitely keen to, and a lot of actually the sort of you know, members of the younger members of the community woodland are very keen to look into this. and it's sort of like on the back burner, but at the moment there isn't anywhere suitable. But it's a further development, and there could be areas where we could look into that. But it's definitely not something that's going to go away.
Okay, thank you. Lorna, did you have anything to add?
We're fairly similar. We've done lots of talking about it, and certainly a opportunity that might develop at some point, but there's no firm plans in place at the moment. But I think if somebody in the community came forward and was interested in taking it further, then we'd be very supportive.
And Glenan Wood, I think there was some.
Yeah, we don't, there doesn't seem to be the opportunity for crofts in Glenan, but just a couple of miles away, Kilfinnan Community Woodlands has got a large number of crofts. And so the community have that, which is great because they're an ex-conifer plantation.
Okay. Jackie, would you like to say something about what's happening at Cormonachan? Because I'm aware that it might not be so easy for you to do that sort of thing.
No, not that I'm aware of. There are a couple of crofts outside of the woodland, a couple of plots of land which have been sold as crofts. One's currently under development, but not so much within the boundary of the woodland.
Yeah, okay, thank you. Now, Duncan Bryden has asked a question which I'll probably answer shortly. I think your question is about the proportion of community woodlands that are part of a wider constituted community development trust or informal partnership with another constituted body. This is something that we're going to be looking at with just the 4 groups. It was difficult to extend that beyond, and we're going to be doing, well, one of our opportunities in the future is for CWA to go into this in much more detail with other groups. So, are there any other questions that I have missed? I think we've picked them all up, and I think we've probably come to the end of the time that we had available for question and answer session. Di, could you turn the presentation back on again, please? Okay, so this goes to, following on from Duncan's question, really is where we are now. So the thing that came through quite clearly from all of the information that we gathered was, and to be honest, it's what every single one of the groups said, was that it was the diversity of the native woods that created the diversity of opportunities. But diversity is true for all the groups. They've all got a common aim to protect and preserve or create the native woodland, but the reasons and circumstances in which they stepped up to take on the challenge are all different. So they all responded to the needs of their communities. And initially when they were established, and continuously as they develop the aims and objectives of their communities that came from that initial consultation. Throughout, they have to balance the needs of the restoration of the woodland or the conservation with the use of the community. So they continue to demonstrate strong support of local people throughout everything that they do. And they're just, so the point of this whole thing is that they're so closely connected to their communities that from the very start, they're continuously communicating. And that builds such a trust that they can do so much more, and they can react really quickly to changes. And they have got the trust from the community that allows them to go ahead and make those changes. But they're continuously informing, they're continuously engaging with their local community. And this feeds into the strategies that they're put forward by the Scottish Government and the UK Government. The Scottish Government, the National Performance Indicators, we discovered that they actually fit every single one of them. The projects that they do, they hit all of the National Performance Indicators. And as such, they're also building wealth within their communities. So through the partnerships that they all have and this strong community engagement, they really are so strongly connected to the woodland itself and the aims of the woodland, or the aims of the community for that woodland and for the resource, to actually continue to deliver the projects that are benefiting all the community and creating this economic and social benefit. And because it was coincidental that the 4 groups that were put forward for this project were in the rainforest zone, then it's helped CWA to build stronger links with the Alliance for Scotland's Rainforest. Di, could I have the next slide, please? So the potential opportunities that we're looking at, we've put together a proposal for CWA to lead a community learning exchange visit. One of the things that the group said when they were all talking to one another, the opportunity they had to do that was that they'd quite like to visit one another. So Arkaig Community Forest visited Knoydart Forest Trust some time ago, but the learning that they gained from there has allowed them to go forward really quickly with the projects that they've had. And they've started to develop a lot more. So they now have the tree nursery and they have the deer larder, which are things that have come through from all of the opportunities that they've identified for their own woodland, but also from going and visiting Knoydart, seeing what they're doing. The groups will continue, hopefully, use the opportunity to have their case studies and their films and do lots more with that. The new development officer for Arkaig Community Forest told us that she found it really, really helpful as a new employee to be able to watch the films and read the case studies. It helped her to set the picture for her work and what she was doing and going forward. So hopefully the groups will be used that. They'll also be able to use them for grants. And CWA will keep these films going and the case studies and help to tell the story of communities and native woods. As I say in Duncan, one of the things that we hope to do is to do further research with other groups across other areas and really expand this research. It's just 4 of them. We were able to get some information, but there's so much more out there and we could really take this so much further. And then we also were looking at the rainforest area. It covers, as you saw in the film, a lot of the West Coast, and we had a wee bit of a research and discovered that throughout ourselves, Community Land Scotland and Development Trust Association Scotland, there's 117 community organisations within this rainforest area. So there's a real opportunity to link all that experience, knowledge and understanding with the 42 CWA groups and work to inspire other communities to make the most of the rainforests. So that's not just the communities, but working with their neighbours, the private landowners and others, so we can learn so much from those who have already been working on that. So, Di, the next slide, please. If you want to know more, we have done 4 individual films. The film that you saw earlier was the collective film that CWA have put together for CWA's use. And we'll also be using these 4 individual films, which give you a lot more information about the individual groups. So if you go back into the link that we gave you, you'll be able to pick up those films. And they're also in the CWA website. You'll be able to look at the written case studies for each of the groups to give you even more detail of what they're up to. As I said, it's very much a kind of snapshot of what's happening because it changes all the time. Even in the 6 months we were doing this project, we couldn't believe how much we had to keep up with what was changing. There was so much changing, but it's been a very great opportunity to speak to all the groups and to bring this together for them. So if we go on to the next slide, I will hand over to Jo, who's going to tell you what's happening at CWA.
Indeed. Thank you so much for that. I'm just pasting into the I'm just pasting into the chat some of the links that I'm going to be talking about. It doesn't look like they've pasted very well, but we'll be sending out an email at the end of the event with a link to the event recording and all of these links as well. So I'll not take up too much of your time. I'm sure you've all got other places to be. I just wanted to say a few words about the sorts of services and support that CWA can offer you. Even if you're not a member, you're always very welcome to get in touch for one-to-one advice, and our email addresses are in the chat there. We also send out regular updates in our monthly e-bulletin and quarterly e-newsletter. So the e-bulletin has, many of you may know, kind of summary of the latest news, the latest events, funding opportunities that might be closing soon. Our feedback from members is that they find that really, really helpful, and it's free to sign up to our mailing list. We are also active on Facebook and Instagram and Twitter for more kind of regular updates. And our website also has a whole host of resources that you can access, including information sheets and case studies and things like that. And we also have a YouTube channel where we put up all the recordings of previous events, including the present one. So take a look at that if you're interested in what we've done before. And we do have an upcoming event in a couple of weeks' time that I think many of you may be interested in. I was really struck in the film just then. Gordon Grice-Stevens, colleague at CWA, talked about if your community doesn't have young people in it, that doesn't work. And someone else in the chat asked a question about succession planning and getting kind of younger people involved in taking over, laying the foundations for the future of community woodlands in Scotland. So I've organised an event. We're going to have actually a speaker from Arkaig Community Forest, Liam McClune, alongside some other speakers who are kind of in their 20s and 30s and who are involved in community woodlands in kind of a variety of ways. I just think it's really important that we hear directly from them about their roots into community woodlands and maybe learn from them about how we can kind of empower younger people to become involved with community woodlands. So if you're interested in attending that, the link is in the chat, and just drop me an email and I will put you in the registration list. And finally, we're also at CWA, we try to facilitate peer-to-peer support and advice, and we do that through a Google group. So if you'd like to join the Google group, you can just post in a question and it will go to everyone else in the kind of network. And then you guys can speak directly to each other and share your learning, ask questions, and we find that works really well. And I've also put a link in the chat to the Community Learning Exchange funding, which we also facilitate. So if you have any questions about any of that, please just drop me a line. And all that's being said, I will hand back to Di.
Thanks, Jo. So that's us just in the process of rounding up, and I really just want to say thank you very much to the panel for answering the questions, and to thank every one of you for asking questions. And as Jo was saying, you know, the Google group is a great place to continue this discussion. And if there are questions in the chat that we haven't managed to pick up today, we will try and see if we can pick up any of that and get back to folk where we can. As we've mentioned, there will be a link sent out for the recording, and the links that Jo has posted in the chat will come with that, just in case. And the slides will also be part of the recording. As we kind of draw a conclusion, I would just like to kind of comment on the range of people that are here today. So we have people who are directly involved in community woodlands, people who would like to be involved in community woodlands, people who obviously really care about their local woodlands. We have agencies and organisations, we have people who work in the field, and it's just, I think that to me reflects the diversity that was mentioned in the slides about the diversity that we see in the habitat in a native woodland is reflected in the diversity of opportunities, and again reflected in all of the diverse strengths and skills that we all bring to this today and will continue to share in the future. So I would just like to encourage you all to continue your involvement, to get involved where you can. to help us share the message around the importance of these native woodlands, the importance that community management of these woodlands and the benefits that they can bring, really making a difference in their own areas through their knowledge and understanding and their ability to work with partners. And I'd just really like to say thank you very much to everyone who has taken the time to come along today, everyone who watches the recording in the future, and everybody who's been involved in the project, the groups themselves, the time they have given us, the people involved in the videos, Tim, the filmmaker, and everyone involved in the project. Diane and I are now completed and finished our short-term contract with CWA at the moment, and Joe and Piers, who's also here today, along with Andy, will continue to work with you all in the future, and I wish you all the very best. Thanks again. Cheery for now.
Thank you very much, Diane and Di. Been brilliant.
Thanks, Piers.